Well, Vice President Vance, welcome to Chevening.
It's great to be here.
Welcome to Kent at the beginning of your vacation here in the UK. This is an indication of the long-standing bonds that exist between our two countries. I know that you personally have spent lots of time in the United Kingdom, and you know that I've spent lots of time in the US. I know that you will be spending some time in the wonderful Cotswolds and the glorious Scotland.
That's right.
But here in Kent, there are beautiful, beautiful coastal walks.
Late summer sun, but the air between the United States and the United Kingdom carried a charge of political tension. Vice President J.D. Vance had crossed for a two-day stay with Foreign Secretary David Lammy, blending the personal with the political. Lammy, Britain's top diplomat and a key Prime Minister Keir Starmer's government, had invited Vance and his family to his official country residence for talks, fishing, and a chance to strengthen personal ties. But behind the scenes of camaraderie, a message, one that would reverberate far beyond the manicured lawns of Chevening. Standing in front of Lammy, with Britain.
What the president has made very clear is our two goals are very simple right now vis-a-vis the situation in Israel and Gaza. Number one, we want to make it so that Hamas cannot attack innocent Israeli civilians ever again. Well, it's one of the things that we're going to talk about. Obviously, the United Kingdom is going to make its decision. We have no plans to recognize a Palestinian state. I don't know what it would mean to really recognize a Palestinian state given the lack of a functional government there. And we think that has to come through the eradication of Hamas. Second, the president has been very moved by these terrible images of the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, so we want to make sure that we solve that problem.
Flags as the backdrop, Vance issued a stark warning to the United Kingdom. His tone was measured but unmistakably. The UK, he said, was in danger of down a very dark path if it continued to embrace laws and policies that, in his view, stifle free speech. This was not just a casual remark of correctness, it was a deliberate reference to Britain's Online Safety Act and broader cultural trends in the West that, according to Vance, risked undermining the democratic principle of open debate. He argued that healthy democracies thrive.
Vice President, what do you make of President Trump's comments last week about you the likely front runner in the 2028 race?
I don't want to talk about lowly things like politics in this grand house. Come on. I think all of us can work on how to solve that problem. Obviously, it's not an easy problem to solve, or it would have already been dealt with. But we share, I think, that focus and that goal. We may have some disagreements about how exactly to accomplish that goal, and we'll talk about that today. Look, I think my view on the politics of 2028 is I'm not really focused even on the election in 2026, much less 2 years after that. And if we do a good job for the American people, the politics will take care of itself. So I'm going to try to do a good job for the American people.
Ideas, not the suppression of them, and that Britain must resist the temptation to silence unpopular or controversial voices under the banner of safety or civility. Vance's concern over free speech was more a philosophical statement. It was a warning grounded in his perception of recent trends in the United States. He drew parallels between what he sees administration's comfort with policing speech and what is emerging in the UK's own legislative agenda. In his telling, the danger is not that openly declares certain political views illegal, but that it creates regulatory frameworks and cultural norms that pressure platforms, institutions, and individuals to self-censor. It is the path of the censor, Vance warned, the path that leads democracies into places they do not want to go. Standing next to Lammy, who listened interruption, Vance made clear that while the US and UK share deep cultural and strategic ties, friendship does not mean avoiding hard truths. The conversation then shifted to an equal subject, the Israel-Palestine conflict. Here, too, the gap between London was clear. The Starmer government has signaled its intent as a Palestinian state in the near future, arguing that such a step could help create momentum toward a negotiated peace. Lammy has been among those advocating this position, saying that it reflects the UK's long-standing support for a two-state solution. Vance, representing the Trump policy line, pushed back hard. He stated plainly that the United States plans to recognize a Palestinian state at this time, citing what he described as the absence of a functional government in Gaza and the enduring presence of Hamas. Recognizing statehood under current conditions.
Mr. Vice President, was
you've
the President given a heads up about Israel's intention to occupy Gaza City?
I'm not going to speak to private conversations between the Israeli government and our government. I think the President obviously has been very clear about his goals, about what he wants to accomplish in the Middle East. But our goals are very clear. We want to make it so that Hamas can't attack innocent people. We want to solve the humanitarian problems in Gaza. We're working incredibly hard, the President and the entire team, to make sure that happens. The President, as you know, speaks to these issues commonly. I'm sure that he'll talk at some point to the media about his response to what's happened or what was announced earlier today in Gaza.
Conditions, he argued, would not bring peace any closer. Instead, it could embolden extremist factions and make a final settlement more difficult. For Vance, the priority should be posed by Hamas while simultaneously addressing the humanitarian catastrophe in the region. The divergence in views did not erupt into open hostility. Vance is too disciplined a communicator to allow that, but the differences were evident. On free speech, he implied that the UK trajectory was edging toward illiberalism. On Middle East policy, he positioned the US as a steadfast ally of Israel and as a skeptic of symbolic gestures that are not backed by changes on the ground. Yet, for all the points of friction, it's not that of a diplomatic clash. Part of that is down to the personal rapport of two men. Vance and Lammy come from very different. Vance from the conservative, populist wing of American politics, Lammy from the progressive heart of Britain's Labour Party. But both have working-class roots, deep faith, and a belief in the value of plain-spoken honesty. Chemistry. Away from the cameras, there were moments of lightness, Vance's children trying their hand at carp fishing in the estate's ponds, laughter over shared meals, and a few good-natured jabs about which side of the Atlantic brews the better tea. According to aides, Lammy had hoped the ending would allow for frank but friendly discussions, and in that sense, it worked. Even when Vance was delivering his shaft, he did so in a tone that acknowledged respect for Britain's sovereignty and the depth of the transatlantic bond. Still, the implications of his words. When a US vice president warns a close out the dangers of censorship, it carries weight in Westminster. The UK has prided itself on being a free expression, but Vance's comments tap into a domestic debate that is far from settled. Supporters of the Online Safety Act are about protecting citizens, especially children, from harmful content. Critics warn that its vague definitions and enforcement powers could be used to suppress legitimate speech. Vance clearly sides with the latter view, and his willingness to voice that opinion in front of Lammy suggests the issue could become a point of ongoing discussion between Washington and London. On foreign policy, the split over Palestinian recognition could prove more than a polite disagreement. Britain's move, if it comes before any break negotiations, would place it at odds with Washington's strategy and could complicate joint efforts in the Middle East. Vance was careful not to frame this as the alliance, but he underscored that US policy is not shifting in that direction anytime soon. The Trump administration, he said, to prioritize security guarantees for Israel and the dismantling of terrorist infrastructure over symbolic diplomatic gestures. For observers, the visit was a case study how close allies manage their differences. There was no joint press conference designed perfect unity, nor was there a public blow-up. Instead, there was the kind of candidly happens when both sides trust the other enough to speak frankly. Vance praised the UK as one of America's most reliable partners, but his praise came with an implicit challenge that Britain must continue to live up to its own ideals. By the end of the visit, the two men had a range of topics beyond free speech and the Middle East, trade, NATO commitments, the war in Ukraine, and the rise of authoritarian regimes around the world. On these issues, there was far more agreement. Both reaffirmed the importance of counter-aggression, supporting Ukraine's defense, and ensuring that NATO remains a credible deterrent force. They also discussed ways to deepen economics, including potential agreements on technology cooperation and clean energy projects. Yet, it was the moments of divergence most vividly. Vance's warning about the dangers of censorship not just in political circles but in the broader public debate. In an era when misinformation, harassment, and extremist content dominate headlines, governments are under pressure to act. But Vance's message was that the cure should end the disease. Democracies, he argued, can only remain vibrant if they tolerate, even protect, speech that some find offensive. His stance on Palestinian statehood, meanwhile, aligns with a long-standing US reluctance to take that step without clear evidence of lasting peace arrangements. In front of Lammy, Vance framed it not as an abstract policy debate but as a matter of real-world consequences, recognizing a state without security guarantees for Israel, he warned, could lead to more violence, not less. In the hours after his remarks, British media outlets highlighted the unusual nature of the exchange. It is not every day that an American vice president delivers such pointed criticism of UK policy while standing alongside one of its most senior ministers. Some commentators praised Vance for speaking his mind, others questioned whether his intervention was helpful or appropriate. Lammy himself kept his response measured for his candor and reaffirming that the UK will make its decisions based on its own assessment of the national interest, even as it values US input.